touch of them quickly. From my left, moving over, is Ms. Yulia KLYMENKO, the first Deputy Head of Transport Infrastructure Committee at the Verkhovna Rada. Then we have Antonia the Senior Associate Expert in the Strategy Center and CEO for the Geopolitical Futures from Romania. I'm sorry, from Ukraine, from Romania. Then after that, I see Matthew BOYSE. He's a Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary responsible for Central Europe at the State Department, USA. Then next to him is James CARAFANO, Vice President of the Kathryn and Shelby Cullom Davis Institute for International Studies, the Heritage Foundation, USA. And on his left, or to your right, I should say, Mr. Thomas Dans, the Visiting Fellow of the Allison Center for Foreign Policy, the Heritage Foundation. And at the end, Kaush, a non-resident Senior Fellow at the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security Atlantic Council, and is a former Senior Advisor on Strategic Engagement at the United States Agency for International Development, again, USA. So here's the concept of the panel. We have a proposed U.S. Black Sea security strategy. It has 5 pillars. It's not approved. It's evolving its way through Congress. It focuses, as I said, in 5 areas. First, on increased bilateral and multilateral engagement. Next, on regional security cooperation, buttressed by an enhanced NATO presence. Next, economic cooperation. Fourth, energy security, and then last, democratic resilience. And today at lunch, the U.S. State Department representative said those a little bit differently. I got these out of an Atlantic Council article, so I'm not sure. What's that? Must be true. Yeah, it must be true. Yeah, if it had been heritage, then I'd have been a suspect. In any event, so we have a little guidance for the panel. So there's kind of a couple of question areas that I'll just lay out, and I think the panelists will probably address them one way or another, or they may address some things that are more important, or maybe something that's happened in the course of the next 2 days is really better to come out. First of all, Black Sea is an area where Russia and Chinese interests intersect. A U.S. Black Sea strategy could mean a policy of containment towards Russia and China. How determined is the U.S. to focus its attention on the Black Sea region in the context of competing challenges in the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific area? So that's kind of one area. Second would be, and it came up a fair amount today, is how will U.S. policy towards Turkey, which is a vital security actor in the Black Sea region, evolved? And as we were reminded by our Turkey representative here this morning, that Turkey is critical to be involved in all efforts within the Black Sea, particularly with security, economics, and so on. Then the last would be this particular Black Sea Security Act. It's a bipartisan initiative led by a Democrat and a Republican at this point. So there'd be a couple questions, though, as this evolves, is how will, if there is a new Republican leadership in the White House, will that change attitudes toward the initiative? Will the administration support a long-term U.S. engagement strategy in the Black Sea? Do you believe a U.S. Black Sea strategy will act as a catalyst for regional cooperation amongst the riparian states of the Black Sea? And will the increased American presence in the region, and I say this, if maintained, motivate other European powers to deploy additional troops and equipment on the ground? So those are some thoughts, things to debate, and I think what we'll do is we'll just go straight across the stage, and we have about 8 minutes for each, and then I'll leave a little bit of time for some Q&A amongst each other here and the audience. With that, I will turn it over to you, Yulia.
Thank you. It's the last panel of our 2-day fruitful discussion, and I hope we will also have fruitful discussion on the Black Sea, because we are living in the we are countries living in the Black Sea, and other countries like US and Britain who has, I believe, deep interest in the Black Sea region, because before, unfortunately, Black Sea was not recognized as a strategic route, strategic object for many countries. So Black Sea was like a local problem of Ukraine, Turkey, and many countries around Black Sea. But now we see that the Black Sea and the blockade of, for example, Ukrainian ports in Black Sea, making troubles not only in Ukraine, but globally and around the world. Why? Because we are, as a very big export country who is growing over 100 million tons per year and exporting 60 million tons per year to the Asian and African country, we cannot do it, we cannot export it, and the global security, food security, damaged basically by this blockade of Russia. Of Ukrainian ports by Russia. So the issue about the Black Sea and security and economy of the Black Sea is not only about countries who are has coast on the Black Sea, but it's about the food security, it's about energy security, because Black Sea contains a lot of gas resources, like only Ukrainian gas resources, it's about 2 trillion cubic meters. Unfortunately, it's occupied, we have no access to it, but we hope to have access at some point, someday. And as well as Romania, we discussed it in the previous panel, has a big project, Neptune Deep, also which will satisfy not only Romanian consumption, but also could be a source of a gas for many European countries. So, Black Sea is a very rich region in resources. It's a strategic region not only for the Black Sea countries, but also for the global food security and energy security. And it is of big interest for Russia and for China as a big brother of Russia, who really understand the value of Black Sea and trying to put influence in different ways on the Black Sea. So we have to mitigate these challenges. We have to have our own strategy and to harmonize our strategy, to have coalitions, naval coalitions, as well as the mining coalitions and many other coalitions, and act together, because otherwise it will be very easy to disassemble us, to split us, and efficiently beat us, basically. Yesterday it was the new coalition, Maritime Capability Coalition, was launched in Britain between European countries, Britain and Ukraine, which will address demining issues as well as reinforcing our naval forces, and everybody welcome to join this coalition because it's an issue of international and global security, not only Ukraine. And I think we can cooperate in many ways, not only in military and not only gas and food security, but also probably the time to start and initiate some platform for the discussions on a Black Sea future, post-war Black Sea, and probably this initiative will start, new club of the parties, of the allies who are interested in the Black Sea stability and security in the future, not only managing the current situation. So this is my thoughts on the Black Sea. We are developing our own maritime strategy. We're happy to share with our own maritime strategy and harmonize and synergize with our partners, so we will be more stronger and we can address our issues against authoritarian regimes who are very friendly, and I would say they are very good in their partnership, because we are fighting with the help of international partners, but also Russia fighting not alone, because Russia has Iranian drones, North Korea weapon, and even China support. So the club of tyrants already established. We have to establish our own club and to fight for our democratic values and for our Black Sea future. That's all from my side. And also I would like to, I have a presence for my dear panelists, because it's one of the security issues between Romania and also in Ukraine and also in the Black Sea. It's a snake island. Yeah, it's a map of Snake Island, which is of vital importance for all of us, because until we Ukrainians control Snake Island, you Romanians on a safe side, including Neptune Deep project. As well as Russia will control it, there is no Neptune Deep project as well as security in the Black Sea. So for this 17-hectare island, we're already fighting 2 years. Every day, every single day, they are bombing and trying to get rid of us, of this island, but we will not allow Russians to acquire this island, and we will keep our front. So this is presents for you and for Mr. George Scutaro, who invited us and gathered us to discuss this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yulia. It might be heartening to you to know that we have carefully considered Serpent Island many, many times in some of the analysis and wargaming that we've done here in Romania. I think she made some very important points. Clearly, this is a center, not just military, but gas and food is a real critical, and the need to have new initiatives from the Western side to counter what we see, the axis of autocratic states, or axis of evil, as we once called it, slightly different members now, but same concept, and the idea of establishing our own club. I think that's a great idea that promotes democratic values and making clear to everybody. I don't know that we've done a good enough job in the U.S. by making clear what this war really is about. It's not just about Ukraine. It's about the difference between living in a liberal democracy and living in a autocratic state.
North Korea.
Yeah, or North Korea. That's a perfect example. And I don't think that's well understood. It's a good point to hammer down. Okay, so next we'll go to Antonia.
First of all, thank you very much for the present. You have no idea, but it actually has more symbolism than you could have thought about. Together with George, on our very first trip to the US to support the Black Sea Strategy Act and to support the idea of Ukraine holding the Snake Island, we have written a study on the Snake Island and its importance. Obviously, it got a lot of attention back then on Twitter because obviously what island in the world is called the Snake Island? So that denomination by itself attracted many Americans who were curious about what is this? Where is this? Therefore, we have an advantage. I will post this also on Twitter and see if it has the same effect. You know, social media today helps. That said, beginning 2022, with the new strategy center, we have looked at the Black Sea region with a lot of concern. Before 2022, I will say that together with some other friends that are in the room, including Jim CARAFANO and Silvio, we have written about the Black Sea in a very strategic sense. I have written about the Black Sea recently and basically labeled it as a geopolitical and geoeconomic node of Eurasia. I am beginning to say this because today and yesterday we have talked about the reconstruction of Ukraine, but I think that the reconstruction of Ukraine is actually a metaphor for the reconstruction of the Black Sea region and the reconstruction of the West. The reason I say this is because the Russian aggression on Ukraine was not on Ukraine only. It was targeted at our union in the West. It was targeting NATO. It was targeting the EU. That said, considering that we have multiple scenarios, and you well said, post-war reconstruction and current reconstruction process. There are two different things. And I will add that, when we look at the Black Sea, we should consider Russia as part of our conversation about the reconstruction project. And we should support the idea of getting to rebuild our abilities of influencing Russia the way we did during the Cold War, if you like, because The map is not changing. You delivered the map. The Snake Island was there and will be there, as Russia will be there after the war. How the war ends, however, and when it ends, will give us that very particular elements and those very particular details referring to the way that we need to build and what to build. So now, with regards to the Black Sea proper, what are the two main scenarios? The West wins in Ukraine. What does it mean that the West wins in Ukraine? We have invested a lot and we have been part of the reconstruction process. And therefore, it means that we need to sustain the reconstruction process in order to make sure that Russian influence doesn't come back in Ukraine. Because we all know that Russia doesn't just want a part of Ukraine, doesn't just want the Black Sea shore of Ukraine, but wants to keep control over Kiev. And that is done politically, usually. So our winning must be long-term. To be long-term, we must invest long-term. And we must keep in mind that the investment is long-term. Now, the other scenario is us not winning. I'm not going to say who wins. Because the one that will win will actually not win. Let me explain why. We have the Kremlin and Putin coming to power in the next 5 years. After 5 years, whoever comes into power will have to deal with whatever this regime has put up together. And it is not a very pleasant situation for Russia. We do have currently in Russia proper shifts at the level of society that are helping the war on the short term, but are destroying Russia on the long term. And therefore, at the end of the process, at the end of Putin's rule, we will have to deal with a likely unstable Russia. And that might be the moment that we might need to take into consideration how to work with Moscow and how to keep Moscow disengaged or engaged into our values and value propositions with regard to the Ukrainian reconstruction. Because, again, we are in this together from the very beginning. And we will need to work with Moscow to make sure that we keep being in this together for the long term. Now, obviously, because we do have mines, not only in the Black Sea, but we do have mines in eastern Ukraine, and we will need to support clearance at some point, even not even only in the eastern Ukraine, but beyond that. We are dealing with a restructuring. The restructuring of the global power system has begun before the war in Ukraine started, even before the pandemic started, because of the economy. But the war in Ukraine has accelerated that restructuring process. And currently we have Russia building up new routes and decoupling fast from our own systems. Which you might say, well, it's good, right? It's good news. Well, yes and no, because the decoupling happens to be also on a route that goes through the South Caucasus, which is in the wider Black Sea area. The north-south corridor stretches from north to south in the Indian Ocean, passing through the South Caucasus and Iran, and it is designed to intersect with the middle corridor, which is going into the Black Sea. And that intersection should be our business, very much. That intersection is key to the global economy, and it is key to the global security. This is why the Black Sea strategy, as I said it in Washington when I visited, is a political symbol, first of all. It needs to be more than a political signal to have to deal with these major questions that refer to the long-term reconstruction of Ukraine, that integrates Eastern Europe, and Eastern Europe, in my mind, is also Belarus, is also the South Caucasus, the wider Black Sea region, and it is also fully backing and fully supporting the build-up that we have started to do in the EU and in the NATO frontier, the eastern frontier of NATO, which has to do with Poland and Romania being the main pillars of this frontier. Now you may ask, well, we have weaknesses, right? Because, 2024 comes with elections, and this symbol that we have supported, the Black Sea Strategy Act, may not necessarily have some, support. I'm not only referring to the US here, I'm referring to the West in general, because we have elections in Europe as well. So how do we deal with this? I do geopolitics, and I say that whatever we don't deal with today, we will deal with long term, because national interest is here to stay. And therefore, there is a good news in all this. Black Sea, not only that the Black Sea matters for the world today, but the Black Sea is here to stay as a geoeconomic and a geopolitical node for Eurasia. And that means that whether we like it or not, we will be in this together. And the faster we get to solve these problems, the better it will be for the long term, because if we postpone, well, that intersection between the middle corridor and the north-south corridor will be tricky on the long term. So we have an opportunity to deal with it now, fast, and we have a challenge to let it slip and let it go for, several years, when we will be hit again, and we will not really understand how to deal with, because the second hit will come as a wave. And that's my main worry and my main challenge on my list. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonia. I think I heard a few key things there. One is that this was not just an attack on Ukraine, which was clearly a conventional military attack, but frankly a non-kinetic attack on the whole region, both surrounding the Black Sea as well as EU and NATO and all our standards and our way of life. Another key point is that we should see the reconstruction really as a regional effort. And as in other cases, we've heard people tie that into the 3 Cs initiatives and things like that. One thing I think is critical is the view how our sanctions regime to other has really changed the power structure of Russia as they've tried to adapt to survive and continue to bring money in. And they're building new networks that we think we're making it hard on them, but they're just finding out ways for them to become more resilient. And finally, as I think you really make the point, if we don't deal with it today, we're going to be dealing it again and very soon. And I've certainly seen reconstruction estimates for Russia in the 3 to 5 year time frame as where they would have a reasonable capability to start another excursion such as this again. So that's a real concern. Thank you very much for your comments. If we can now, excuse me, to keep up with my thing here. So now we're going to move down to Matthew, please, if you could offer your comments.
Yes, so thank you, and thank you also, Yulia, for this magnificent, I love the ribbon. I love the ribbon. It's what a great ribbon. I'll use it for a Christmas present this year. Congratulations to the New Strategy Center for organizing this conference. It really is kind of the latest in a series of these conferences that goes from, okay, we had Paris, we've had Lugano, we've had Berlin, we've had London, we have Sinaia, which is great. it's very important, even though a war is raging, Russia's war against Ukraine is raging, it pays to think about these things even now, prepare for the day after, but even during, so that we can be as prepared as possible for then. It's just good strategic thinking, it's good planning, prudent planning. Because Ukraine is defending the West every day, and we need to be aware of that. And of course, this takes place while the European Council is meeting, and this is going to be very interesting to see how they deal with this issue, because we need to, they have an incredibly important role to play. After all, it's Russia that overturned the European Security Order and all the European security architecture post-1989, and redrawing the map of Europe. So it is, after all, a paramount importance to them, and I hope they continue to grasp the imperative here. So on the U.S. side, though, so we've had the German Marshall Fund has had a conference on Ukraine reconstruction. They started last year. They've sort of predictably talked about a new Marshall Plan, although not, not as a template, but more as an inspiration. They talked about, parts of it were OBE'd now because, of course, time has marched on. But they, it's a little OBE'd in terms of cost, et cetera. But they got the conversation going, and they talked to sort of identify the critical role of the G7 and the EU, and the importance of focusing on this question of what to do with Russian assets, which unfortunately is still not resolved, and the whole question of war insurance, how to deal with that, and also, of course, this idea that maybe the United States would have a role in the security side, and Europe would have more of a role in the recovery, reconstruction, or modernization, whatever we call it. And then Rand also came out with a very solid study a number of months ago, which focused more on the magnitude of the challenge and the length of time will be required to deal with this, and of course the costs and the whole donor coordination piece, and also the fact that reform is necessary in addition to just reconstruction. And of course, the U.S. government, now we have a Ukraine reconstruction envoy, former Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker. And she's focused a lot on mobilization of foreign direct investment, donor priorities, donor coordination, that sort of thing, and the whole role of the IFIs and G7 and EU. So the United States, the USG is starting to ramp up its focus on this too. The Senate, as we've talked about, is the Black Sea Security Act. I mean, this is all good, although it has taken, I'm afraid, a little bit too long for this to materialize. And the Assistant Secretary for European Affairs, excuse me, finally delivered something that a strategy, a strategy before the Congress in October. It took, unfortunately, several years to deliver this. We were working on this at the end of the previous administration, but so finally we have that. It's taken too long, but we have it. It's State Department only rather than whole of government, and we really do need a whole of government approach rather than just a State Department approach. And of course the USG has also finally kind of endorsed this idea of the eastern flank of NATO. Is no longer enhanced forward presence, tailored forward presence. It's basically uniform the entire eastern flank of NATO, which is the way it should have been all along. Rather than prioritizing the northeast, kind of sector and deprioritizing the southeast sector. Now there's one threat, one flank, and one presence, an idea I've been pushing now for some time, and so that's finally happening. So this is all good, even if it's taken a while. But we need a whole of government approach to this. And I'm going to take the administration at its word that it's actually moving forward on this. It's really high time. Now, this all takes place against this a backdrop of unbelievable, of outrageous Russian rhetoric, and of course we saw Putin's remarks last week and his press conference today, and this whole discussion of where should we draw the border of Europe with Ukraine? I mean, this language is increasingly provocative. It is so outrageous that we have to realize that this adversary is actually planning for a long war, and so and is organizing as such. And so this is against a reality that we have to really take into consideration. Because sometimes the discussion about Reconstruction can seem almost academic in that kind of a context, because when you're dealing with an adversary who, with that kind of timeline and that kind of intent, all this discussion is wonderful, but it also runs up against this hard reality. And so, and of course, how can you talk about Reconstruction without security? You need much more air defense capability. You need more insurance, and I'm afraid that the whole war insurance issue is also has not progressed that far as I can tell. These people who are involved in this in other countries are lamenting the difficulty of this. So nobody's kind of resolved that piece. So these are all some pretty brutal realities. And we need to keep this all in mind as we talk about the whole Reconstruction piece. But no, Europe tends to focus a lot on the debate in the United States about whether the administration or whether the Congress is going to do this or that, and of course that's all logical. And this is not a partisan statement, but I must say that. While the focus right now tends to be on the Republican side about them sort of blocking this aid. People I think also must realize that the Democrats have also been dribbling, sort of have done a lot of have slow rolled a lot of the assistance to Ukraine, and while they've done some good things, I think we would probably be in a different place had they done a lot more a lot earlier. And it's only allowed the Russian army to dig in further, and it's made it more difficult for the Ukrainian counteroffensive to succeed. And I'm afraid a lot more Ukrainians have died or wounded as a result of this. Had only more assistance been of a higher quality been provided earlier, and if additional military assistance were not continually blocked. ATACMS. This is, and of course, and this applies also to Germany as well. The Taurus is a system needs to be supplied to the Ukraine, and it's still not being done, and this of course is having negative effects it's only emboldening Putin as he sees the slow rolling of assistance. However much and however important and valuable it is, it should have been more a lot earlier. And this has unfortunately put Ukraine in this situation, and of course us by extension. So anyway, but this does apply to the European security order. And I must say that as Europeans focus on what's going on in the United States, these debates are all of enormous importance. But the United States does have a critical kind of interest in European stability and prosperity and peace and all this. But it is, after all, the Europeans that habit this space, and they really, and when Americans look at how some of the European allies are approaching this war, some are very, very engaged and very, 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 deeply supportive, and others are less so. Let's put it that way. And this unfortunately also delivers a message to those Americans who are skeptical that in their own theater there are countries that are still not really all in on this, and it unfortunately gives them an excuse to be also maybe not all in, and this is of course a problem. So we just have this. We have to, and of course, I must say that even with so the more the better in that respect, because it does, and even as far as our own administration is concerned, when they refuse to deal with the problem of the southern border, which you can argue is completely separate from the Ukraine issue, and of course, basically it is. I mean, it's a domestic political issue, but it has become a political issue in the United States, and the administration's unwillingness to resolve this issue has given, unfortunately, the Republican opposition another excuse not to do what it really, I think, instinctively wants to do because of its sympathy towards Ukraine and its plight. But still, these sorts of things aren't really helpful. And of course, just finally, I mean, they're also, so the idea is to try to, sort of to remove as many of these obstacles as possible. The southern border problem, or the lack of uniformity particularly within Western Europe, of those countries that are not doing as much as they could, because they are rich and prosperous and countries. And then, I mean, Ukraine has also they got rid of an important issue just this weekend on this Hungarian minority issue that Viktor Orban had been using for years to justify a critical stance vis-a-vis Ukraine. Finally, your government has moved on with that, and that's a very welcome. Yet another issue is sort of is off the table, and. But then, of course, unfortunately, the Hungarian government has moved the goalposts a bit. But still, it's important that these issues have been gotten rid of because we have a big problem of what happens if Russia wins this war. And this would be not good for Europe or for the United States or for the global West or for a lot of other parts of the world.
Matthew, can you wrap up in about a minute or so?
Yeah. And so just last point that Ukraine could also do, I think, maybe just a bit more as well on some of on one last narrative that is making the rounds in the United States, and that is this whole question of corruption. And I know your government has made a lot of progress on this, which is all good. But there is this narrative out there, and it doesn't help the friends of Ukraine, unfortunately, because they use this as an excuse even when progress is significant and the trend lines are down and all the good, there's a lot of good news there, but still there's this narrative is out there and it needs to be gotten rid of to the extent possible. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. A couple of things I took away is that the U.S. government is beginning to ramp up focus on the reconstitution, although perhaps not as quick as you might like. And the hope that we really have to approach this through all elements of our government, as well as with Ukraine and others. There's a, a real issue with trying to reconstruct things without security assurances. And one that comes really close to my heart is I've been very frustrated with this, is not providing all the capabilities we should have. And I like to characterize that as we have a strategy not to lose, but we have never articulated a strategy to win, and we haven't been providing what we should have. And then finally, there are a number of roadblocks out there. As you mentioned, when some EU countries or NATO countries aren't as supportive as maybe they should be, that's easy to use by the U.S. or the corruption issue and others. Easy for those in the U.S. to use that as an example why they shouldn't give the support. And let's hope we can overcome those in the future. So thank you very much, and now can we turn next to you, Jim, please?
So for all my Swedish friends who I know are watching, I need a map of Gotland so I can bookend it with my map of Snake Island and put it in my office. All I had to do was hear the first hearing of the administration talking about their Black Sea strategy with the 5 pillars to know that I absolutely, totally hate it and think it's really stupid. So I guess we can be happy that there's a strategy and there's an act, but I don't really think it's getting to the core issue. I think there's really only 2 pillars that matter. First of all, from the U.S. perspective with my NATO hat on, the Black Sea is less of an issue. The United States Navy from the Med, if there was a war, could kill everything in the Black Sea. And that's great, but that doesn't solve the problem of a free and open Black Sea, and it certainly doesn't solve Ukraine's problem. That's a very different problem set. And the only really practical answer, the only practical way to address this from a security perspective is capacity building. To building the capacity of all of the littoral states to deal with the challenges that prevent ensuring that we have a free and open Black Sea. And we all know what these are: air defense, anti-ship, anti-submarine warfare, mine warfare, air capability, situational awareness, helping all the states in the Black Sea region develop their capacities to conduct these missions and to cooperate and work together is the thing that can provide the assurance that the Black Sea remains an avenue open for commerce. And I think the Ukrainians have done us all a tremendous service by demonstrating you can do a lot to deny space to adversarial fleets, even without a navy. I think this is actually, in recorded history, the first time a country won a naval battle without a navy. So that's actually pretty cool.
Without fleet.
Without a fleet. Well, you do have a navy, yeah, you got a rowboat somewhere. So I think that should be the focus of the U.S. and and it doesn't even have to be in the NATO context. That really has to be the focus of the U.S. effort, promoting, engaging, continuing cooperating in building up the capacity of the littoral states to keep the waters free and open. It makes no sense whatsoever to invest in the security of a free and open Black Sea if there isn't an infrastructure flow in an economy to take advantage of it. So if we're going to invest in building this umbrella to give people the confidence that they can transit these waters in peace, then we ought to be building the infrastructure to exploit that. And whether it's energy or transportation or cyber, and just go back to the comments on the last panel about this is really ought to be a transatlantic community imperative, building out the infrastructure, whether you want to call it the 3 Cs or something else, connecting that to the middle corridor, bringing Central Asia and the Caucasus into this economic community. These are the two things that we have to do. And all the rest, all those other pillars, it's just like blah, blah. So, and I don't see that focus from the United States. The U.S. reduced its commitment to the Black Sea Initiative from $1 billion to $300 million. And as far as I know, that $300 million is just sitting there. You don't see the U.S. government out pushing like, where's a good project? Where's a good project? And so there's not a push at initiative from the U.S. side. And the most interesting and exciting and productive things I've seen on capacity building in the Black Sea in the last year have actually been done without the United States. So maybe I'm wrong, but I feel we're kind of absent. So I actually think that we have under-resourced this. I, like everybody else, I'm super glad that people can spell the Black Sea now. And I'm not saying find it on a map, right? But they can. But that at least they know there is one. But I just think we're under-resourcing this, and we're not doing a good service to our friends and allies.
Okay, thanks very much, Jim. Very good points. The need to build capacity, have a free and open Black Sea, work with all the riparian states to improve their capabilities, and in a sense, let them manage themselves. And also wonderful what's going on in the naval battles and a lot of the bag of tricks.
I forgot one point I want to add. There's a real opportunity here, and I think there's going to be great synergy actually between the Asia-Pacific theater and what can be done in the Black Sea. Because the Straits of Taiwan are a little wider, right? But all the kinds of capabilities we're going to be developing in the Straits of Taiwan, those exact same capabilities and technologies would be really helpful in the Black Sea. And conversely, all the innovative, creative things that are being done in the Black Sea now, a lot of it on a shoestring, are things that we can figure out how to leverage in the Asia-Pacific theater. So I have great optimism that we're going to be able to develop the capacity and capability to do this relatively in an affordable manner. So that just...
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and I have some inside information, which I won't elaborate too much on, but some of the solutions that have helped your problem to counter the Russian fleet, they were completely commercially developed.
Exactly.
Even private defense companies could not move fast enough, and that's a lesson to the West in order to do what had to be done. Okay, thank you very much. Let's turn now to Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you, first off, for the kind poster, Your Excellency, and it will occupy a honored space in my office. I would, by way of background, a colleague of Dr. CARAFANO's here at Heritage, joined recently. I was in the Trump administration at Treasury, International Affairs, but most of my career has been in the private investment world as a private equity investor, venture capitalist, mostly here, not so much in Romania, but in Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, Azerbaijan, and the rest. I can also claim that as a student in Moscow in 1990, I marched in the street for Ukrainian independence. So you won't hear probably that too much from senior Trump officials. So we kind of know what the stakes are here. Talk about Snake Island. You know, it's funny, I walk the halls of Congress on a regular basis, and all the halls of Congress, each of our congressmen and women have their own offices, of course, and they decorate the outsides of it with things that are important to them. And a number of them have "I Stand With Ukraine" flags up and posters. There's one guy, he's a Republican, so I'm not going to give him up, but he has, for the non-Russian speakers out there, I'm not going to complete the sentence because I know they're listening, but it says, "Ruski kорабль идти на," and well, that's Russian, that's what the, you know, the, it's Russian ship, you know what, type of expression. So that's you know, I guess this is a very significant piece. So thank you. And just not to get too far afield, but there's a little lesson in it even for the U.S. And I'll just kind of draw it together with how it relates to the Black Sea. There's only one, and most people won't know this, there's only one instance in the entire U.S. history where we have ceded our territory in the face of territorial aggression by an outside power. And that was actually to Russia. And it's an island, it's called Wrangel Island. There's also the DeLong Islands. So these are islands that are in the Arctic Ocean. Now they're owned by Russia, or claimed by Russia. Ostrov Wrangela. I wrote about this last year. I'm no friend of the MFA, probably, in Russia, because it punched a lot of buttons. And they know that's the fact. We do not, the longest maritime border in the world is between the U.S. and Russia. And it's not set by any treaty. There's a treaty that's been signed, it's been approved in the Senate, it was never approved in the Duma. So for a nation that's hung up, and as the Russians are, on legal understandings, we don't have one. We've got a handshake agreement with them. This is a problem. This is a problem. And in fact, you know, it was something that stayed frozen for a long time. And then I think when they made their moves on Ukraine, it kind of de-thawed. So what now, to draw that to the Black Sea and what's going on beyond the whole problem here is, you know, and this 3 Cs initiative, icebreakers. The U.S. has 1.5 for an Arctic nation. The best icebreakers in the world are made in Helsinki. The second best icebreaker, or for scientific, is made here in Romania. In fact, the world's best Antarctic research vessel was built here in 2020 in Daman Shipyard, right on the border of Russia, up there in Galatz. And that is a very important point of how our cooperation economically kind of not only helps in this region, but helps as allies in other parts of the world. So we can build ships. This is a NATO shipyard that is one of the best in the world here in Romania. We talk about getting to a 350 ship navy in the U.S. We don't have the capacity, so we have to begin to think about things like this. So there's a real concrete example commercially of how this kind of makes sense for greater partnerships. I'll give you a couple more, and just to cite a couple more examples. So the largest refinery in Romania is owned by Kazakhstan, right? Kazmunai Gas. It's a state-owned oil and gas company, right? Now, that's a lot of the diesel fuel that's going into Ukrainian tanks. It's coming from Kazakhstan. It's oil that's shipped through pipeline. It has to come out Novorossiysk today, but this is a connectivity between Kazakhstan and really Ukraine in a way that keeps everybody in the fight, right? Now, it has a vital linchpin there, a pressure point there in Novorossiysk, but there's a move to really expand another export route out, through a pipeline system that ends in Turkey. So all this begins to fit together. A third example, we heard yesterday about Kyivstar, if I mispronounce it, my apologies. Actually, I'll tell you what, my first Russian teacher, I started Russian when I was a kid. I'm not for Russian extraction or anything. I went to public school in the States, and they figured, well, we need to start teaching some homegrown kids Russian. I had my teacher was a Ukrainian from Odessa. She was a refusenik. So when I got to Moscow in 1990, and I kind of opened my mouth up for the first time, never really talked to Russians except for a couple of teachers. They said, "You sound like a Ukrainian Jew." But we can fix this. And, we'll take you into the phonetics lab and get this out of you. So that's something, it's a badge of honor, I'll tell you that much. But to the point, Kyivstar gets hit by a cyber attack, right, 2 days ago or yesterday. The problem there is that's built on Huawei equipment. Right, so we'll recognize that as a valuable part of our infrastructure, right? The Black Sea is not only just kind of a physical thing, it's an informational band, but hey, we've got a problem, right? They're rebuilding that system. They've said $600 million going into it, the sponsors who own it today. We're gonna build it back on Huawei technology. Well, that's not something that we as a government, and I'm not in the government, so I no longer speak for it, but we would certainly have an issue with that. So when you talk about like rebuilding, there are some big upfront judgments that have to be made, and they're not going to be necessarily easy ones. I mean, we drive through and I would say like the last points I'll leave with you is in terms of like what Romania should be doing, and I've said this, is focus on the things that will help Romania in the long term. Those will also help Ukraine, right? The absolute top thing you need to be doing, again, wearing a hat as a Republican here, is energy independence. You've achieved that, but you have a chance to really break through it with Neptune Deep. I would put 100% of my effort on that. And with all due respect to our great hosts in Romania here and to the country, they're great allies. But from the government point of view, you have to be doing a lot to not turn people away. Now, XII left. That's a shame, right? And I'm not going to go through the background story of that. But like the government needs to understand you can't turn around and tax a private venture with solidarity taxes, right? This is a Soviet construct here that you would take almost $500 million from them because you have a budget shortfall that needs to be fed. $4 billion in the scheme of things to bring Neptune Deep online, it's nothing. It's nothing. And that's the problem. We fought this war as a hybrid conflict, which is problematic, but we also said it was going to be an economic one. Well, if it's an economic one, it's time to go on offense. We need to be building these bridges and investing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. Some interesting points about the maritime situation between U.S. and Russia, but in particular, I think you bring out that critical point is that with the opening with global warming, the opening of the Arctic and things like that. We really don't have any icebreakers, and it's great that Romania has got the capacity to build ships, and maybe they can take advantage of that here. And I think I'll hit your last point also, in particular about cyber and the criticality there. And I know we've talked about opening, Jim, you talked about opening the corridor into Central Asia. And one thing I keep pondering is why are they all on .ru? You know, that's the whole internet for them is all controlled by Russia. And that might be something we ought to think about. Okay, thank you very much. And Kaush, you're the last speaker, and then we'll go to some Q&A. Thank you.
No, thanks a lot. I think we can sort of follow two approaches here. One, we can have our own sort of wish list of what we ought to be in the Black Sea strategy for the United States, and you saw pretty eclectic and a wide-ranging sort of elements of that. We have that for several reasons around the world, and they may or may not work, or how much attention or support they generate, maybe in, you know, up and down. Probably I'm more like with Jim saying how well it would be received first time it comes up. The other thing is to say how Black Sea fits into the greatest sort of security challenge and geopolitical challenge for the United States, and how relevant it is and how nested it is in that framework. Our biggest challenge is certainly China, and our biggest sort of important theater is the Indo-Pacific. And the idea of keeping free and open Indo-Pacific is what gravitates and generates most interest and will do for time to come. The biggest threat of our stuff is to have many disconnected regional initiatives to the main one, where you run into the situation which you see right now, where we shouldn't be in Ukraine, we should really be in Taiwan. We do more stuff in Ukraine, we'll lose out on Taiwan. If you feed into that, you're doing yourself a disservice. So within our free and open Indo-Pacific, the main element that is going from that now, and it's happening as we speak, and it's happening organically. Our effort now is going to be to connect the free and open Indo-Pacific with the free and open Mid-Atlantic. So this is the main theme that's going to come up, the linking between the Indo-Pacific and the Mid-Atlantic. That is what I'll spend most of my time, and that's what most of America, they have not framed it yet, but that's what we're going to be spending a lot of our time on. So if we talk about linking up, and it'll be the biggest issue in next G7 and when Italy hosts it. We'll speak, I think a big deal of it will be the connection between Mid-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific. Now, if you're talking about that, then the issue then is how relevant and important is a free and open Black Sea? So we can have this 5-point, I mean, you look at that obviously some Deputy Assistant Secretary or staffer wrote that because there are 5 bases and all of them talk about increased coordination in something. Democracy, resilience, energy, some other elements, some defense production. So it's 5 ways of saying we ought to coordinate a little bit more in Black Sea. I think you got to distill it down so I can talk to people in Newcastle, Wyoming, that it makes say, why the heck am I in Black Sea? So I'm going to have a free and open Indo-Pacific, a free and open Mid-Atlantic, and it's very important to have a free and open Black Sea. And why am I having a free and open Black Sea? Because my entire initiative globally is to reinforce the regional resiliency of my partners who are committed to free and open. That's what my strategy is, and that's why Black Sea matters to me. So if that's why Black Sea matters to me, then I have to say, okay, what are the specific things I'm going to do in Black Sea after I frame it in a free and open Indo-Pacific scenario? So 2 fundamental sort of direct relations, leading up a little too much, on what Jim in the morning panel today said, what security guarantees for Ukraine. And that word is loaded. People reacted one way, I reacted other way, my colleagues. The security guarantee for Ukraine is Ukrainian integration into a free and open world. That is the security guarantee is the integration of Ukraine is the security guarantee. So the integration of Ukraine in this particular instance in Black Sea situation is really linking up of two important elements. One is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. That was the biggest thing that came out of G20. Now, there's an issue within that with obviously the October 7th in Israel, but irrespective of the October 7th, the economic fundamentals are so strong that the IMEC or a version of that will pursue and continue. The Turkish colleague is not here. Actually, he was with me in Afghanistan. He was the ambassador for the time that I served there. And so we talked a little bit after that. As soon as IMEC was announced in G20, the first thing that Turkey did was act on it and said, nope, this is not the only way the world works. The way the world should work is there should be a Persian Gulf connection to Iran, to Turkey, to the Black Sea. That's the way the world works. Now, irrespective of not whether this is right or wrong, the issue is that right off the bat there was an interest and a reaction from Turkey that I want to play in this game. That's what that signals. And so what I got to do in Black Sea is connect IMEC to the three Seas. That is what I mean when I say a free and open Indo-Pacific. I need to connect the three Seas initiative to the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. That is the essence of what Black Sea is about. Also, this is the connection, the only way out for Central Asia to connect to any part of free and open world. It is screwed between the bear and the dragon. So you got nowhere else to go. You can't go east, can't go north. It'd love to go south, but you got problematic states like Pakistan and Afghanistan and even Iran. So the only way out is the west. And why is it the only way? So why is that relevant? Because my good friend Greg just asked the question, what the heck is with Kazakhstan? Everything is internet, is Russian. Yes, it is, because there is no other way. What's the other way? The other way is a digital cable that goes across from here, the Global Gateway Program, crosses across Black Sea, goes across Caspian. That's how you get a different domain in it. So these are what a free and open Black Sea means. That is what the U.S. interest is. That is how you can connect Black Sea to Indo-Pacific and to what's happening in other parts of the world. And that is how you integrate it, and that's what and everything that all the 5 pillars, plus the 7 pillars that were talked about by the Prime Minister of Ukraine yesterday morning, plus what we discussed in the strategic. I mean, there are many pillars, but they all come down into this sort of a strategic vision of what we ought to be doing. So I think that's would be a good effort, but learned a lot. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. Appreciate it. Back to you, Greg.
Thank you very much, and I think you really illustrate it well. Be nice if we could make a map of what that looks like to go with the one we just got here. Okay, so we have 15 minutes for Q&A, or you can ask each other questions if you like. Anyone in the audience?
I have a question.
Great.
I have a question to my U.S. colleagues, why Black Sea matters. Actually, I think Russia and China, they're just training on the Black Sea. The next will be in the Pacific and the Taiwan Strait. So it's just, so to say, homework. And allow them to do it freely in the Black Sea will result in a blockade of Taiwan Strait and 80% of container trade and many other things around it. So you have to link it, not, not only because Black Sea is geographically not on the way for US or any other routes, but also politically and strategically, because also Russia, as well as I think China, has the military bases and also shipyards. Which are repairing not only commercial vessels but also warships. And in their strategy, latest strategy, 2020, adopted in 2022, they are constructing and building trading ships which must be converted into warships immediately. It means that the construction, technical construction of the vessels will be such that it will be easily converted into warships. Today it's taking containers, tomorrow it's taking calibers or any other weapons. So the situation which is in the Black Sea should be, to my mind, broader than only Black Sea problems and our problems in our region. So sure, we will fight. Sure, we need more air defense for the coastal cities, for the coastal regions. We need more air defense for the grain corridors. We need more air defense for the Snake Island and for the other projects in the Black Sea, because otherwise they will not sustain. It's impossible to live on a Black Sea coast if it, hitting 3 times a day by Shaheeds or by missiles. No, and we cannot talk about the repairing, reconstruction or infrastructure building if we have 3 missiles per day. Every day. For past few months, Russians destroyed 100 facilities on the Black Sea and the Danube cluster. So what we're talking about. So my question to you, do you see Black Sea as a training base and repairing base for Russia and China that they will replicate in the Pacific region easily? They are just training on us.
Well, Jim can answer. You want to answer? You want me to? Okay. So well, I think first of all, full in agreement with what you're saying. The whole idea here is about broadening the issue. There's sort of 3 different trends that are going on which need to be addressed here. One is certainly the security challenge in the Black Sea. That's the obvious one. That has to be then met with the security assurances, assistance, guarantee, whatever the word. To be able to do that devoid of a greater economic rationale becomes difficult. So then the question is, do I lead with security or do I lead with a greater sort of economic rationale? So what I articulated, or what would prefer to, is to go with a greater economic rationale. So once we go towards that area, then there are 2 or 3 very almost opportunistically have come out of this unfortunate barbaric invasion. So one was what articulated and talked in the morning session by the German colleague, that we're not talking about Ukraine now a neutral or buffer state. Now it's already integrated. So the drivers for integration in the Eastern Europe and the border has been substantially energized because of this. So that really is something which is very useful for me to articulate the free and open. Yeah, before that, when we talked about Black Sea, our economic interest largely was energy. It was some pipeline going. That's all we talked about Black Sea, none more than that. Today, it's a lot more than that. That's number one. Number two, we are in this constant response on how best to respond to something like Belt and Road Initiative. They've got many elements to this. Now, Belt and Road, we talk more about it than the damn China. We have no idea what the heck it is, but it's a great slogan. The way to respond to Belt and Road is not to have a global, America-led effort, but it's more a bottom-up effort. It's a question of how do we energize, as I said earlier, reinforcing resiliency in a regional basis where the situation is ripe and the partners are there to do so. For all the reasons that I articulated earlier, Black Sea now appears far more ripe for that kind of a region to look at it as an economic initiative which has multiple benefits, of which security is a very primary benefit as a secondary element to it. So that's why what you're saying, so that's the broader theme. Whether it's embedded within that, your question, that if we don't do it, Russia and China are going to take advantage. They're going to take advantage everywhere. The argument for that is far more in Indo-Pacific. It's far more in Latin America. There's Africa. There's a lot of places they're taking advantage. So that's relevant to you, but from me, from a global perspective, I deal with it everywhere. I want to focus in what's driving and why Black Sea today, and those are the reasons I just... Thanks.
Matt, I want to amplify that, but go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that I do agree with you. I do think this is quote unquote practice. In other words, but it's only the latest example that Russia's been using to test the global West. I mean, it started. I don't know when do you start the clock? I mean, was it Nord Stream 1 or 2, or was it 2008, or was it 2014 or whatever, the reset or whatever. I mean, these were just, way stations, and it's sort of assessment by the hard men in the Kremlin to basically to sort of see how is the West going to react to when we push and push and push and push, and at what point do they actually start resisting, seriously resisting, and how strong are they? And this is unfortunately a kind of a correlation of forces thing. It's a political will thing. It's sometimes harder to quantify, but it's actually but there are signs of strength versus weakness, and the more weakness, the more it emboldens, and the more it can be used in other theaters where including the whatever the Far East and elsewhere. So I see them all as interlinked. I'll end there. Thank you.
No, so nobody's debating the reality of what you said, that either we need a free and open Black Sea, or that these are very dangerous things that they're doing that we have to be able to counter. What we're really having here is really a marketing discussion. And particularly in the framing that Kaush and I have been trying to do is what would sell to Americans. So Americans are, look, I mean, we are not isolationists. We're never going to be isolationists. We're never going to abandon our friends and allies. But generally, if you talk to Americans today, they don't like nation building. They don't like regime change. They don't like forever wars. So what we've tried to do is reframe this discussion not as...
They don't like five-part, they don't like
five-part, there's what, 18 things, right?
I don't know anything about.
Yeah, and most of the, stuff like the Black Sea, to them that's just blah, blah, right? But what we're trying to articulate is, typically the American strategic dialogue is very Manichaean. It's, we're gonna go out and conquer the world, or we should be isolationists and sit here and hide and hope that bad things go away. And the reality is we have to deal with large adversarial powers who have means and capability to make our lives miserable and threaten our interests, and threaten friends and allies who are important to us. Our argument is rather than trying to frame this in a traditional way of it's us versus them, is to frame it in a way as, look, if we link the world back together in the way that the world naturally wants to be linked together, in the way it's actually been linked together for most of its history, that is going to achieve much of what the United States wants without the United States doing all of that. So, not that I'm saying it's all about China and Iran and, Russia, but it's all about China and Iran and Russia. And the argument is if we do the kinds of things that we're talking about, this is sucking oxygen out of the room, because what you're doing is you're taking away places for people who want to be adversarial and use that as a way to advance their interests and power. You're taking away their playground. And so the idea of knitting together the north-south corridor, the middle corridor, into the across the Middle East, into the Indo-Pacific, and then we haven't even got started talking about what we can then do in terms of the Eastern and Western Med and engaging North and West and East Africa. This is, I think, wildly transformative. And the reason we get excited about this, and it's not just Pollyannish, it's not just a marketing campaign, is this is incredibly doable. Look, Russia is, I don't care how you think the future is going to go, nobody can argue that Russia is more powerful in the post-Soviet space than it was 5 years ago. The reality is everywhere in the post-Soviet space, Russia is weaker today than they've been since 1990. The other thing is, the China brand is down globally. Right? Nobody wants to be a suburb of Beijing. And the reality is China's economy is struggling, and to maintain the very aggressive global strategy it has, it may be able to do it a lot of ways, but it's not going to be able to do it with cash. And Iran, for whatever you think, is a dangerous adversarial power that is the root of all bad things in the Middle East. People would rather not do business with them. So you put those two things together, and if there is ever time to make the argument of this, and what I would say about this is, look, a lot of the capability of the things that can be done in the Black Sea, you guys can do that with a little bit of help and support. Europe can finance most of the north-south infrastructure. The Caucasus and Central Asia can bring a lot to the table. Turkey can bring an enormous amount to the table. look, what the United States is really going to bring a lot to the table is conventional deterrence, particularly in the Indo-Pacific theater. But the reality is look, the North Corridor is dead. Nobody's going to use that. The Middle Corridor is about linking Central Asia to the West, not China. The Chinese are never going to own the Southern Corridor. It's never going to happen. So we have a leg up on this, but we have to be serious about this, China. And I'll end on this, but to Kaush's point is, we have the Chinese looking to build naval facilities in, I always get my east, right? West Africa, in Latin America. They want to challenge our space in the Atlantic community, but we can, we have to deal with that. But all this, I think, is incredibly doable. And if we don't do this now, we will not. This is the best opportunity we ever have to make the world more peaceful and more stable and push World War III further away. Sorry.
Last comment?
Yeah, just to add something too from I hate to bring it back to oil and gas and energy, but as a Texan, that's how we think. So no apologies. But why is Black Sea so important to us? Well, look at the dollars for the U.S. where they flow. And a lot of people don't recognize that we've got two, the U.S. doesn't have a state-owned oil and gas company, but we've got Exxon and Chevron, which is essentially our flagship companies. Two of their biggest investments anywhere in the entire world are in Kazakhstan. We've got over $63 billion invested there. That is, compared to Russia, that's up 4x. Russia has $17 billion in Kazakhstan. So China, we're multiples of China too. So that's a country in Central Asia doing business with America. Now it's also flowing 1.4 million barrels a day westward, right? Some of which, like I said earlier, goes into a refinery here in Romania and goes into tanks in Ukraine today. A lot of it also goes down to Israel, right? So look, we've got vested interest in keeping the Black Sea and this commerce flowing. We've got investments, we've got our partners depending on it, et cetera. So now when we look at something there was a move for the U.S. to sponsor a large new port in Georgia, right? Anaklia, that kind of stalled out, right? Well, now the Russians are building one, or have announced that they're building one, Ochumchiri, which is like 5 kilometers. I mean, it's literally right next door in Adjunct. That's Georgian territory. We know, I mean, I don't have to tell the Ukrainians the history of when Russia builds ports in your country, what happens next. So that, is a reason we need to, like I say, stay on the offense here. Commercially, we set out to fight this both, kinetically, but also commercially. And that's where this importance comes in. So,
All right, thank you very much. Okay, I have 3 concluding items. We're out of time. First is, of course, thank you for the map. And I wanted to let you know my partner back there has a T-shirt with what the Ukrainians told the Russians to do that day. I won't say the word here since I'm on video and everything else. Second, I want to thank the panel members, all their excellent contributions. Maybe we can have an applause for them. Thank you. And last, I want to thank the new Strategy Center for putting this together and George Scotaro's vision for it, as well as all the people that helped throughout the last couple of days. And with that, I want to invite George to come to conclude the conference.
Thank you very much, Greg. I want to express my gratitude to all speakers and distinguished guests, especially from Ukraine. I really appreciate the effort to be here. And I hope that after this conference, we understand better the strategic role of Romania in the reconstruction process of Ukraine and how important is this process of reconstruction and modernization of Ukraine as part of Europe, not only for Romania, but for other countries in EU and NATO. I want to express my gratitude, of course, to the great team of New Strategy Center, to interprets, and to Alexandrian Spirit Hotel team. And I think, and I'm very grateful to you, Yulia, for this map, for your gift. What kind of Ukraine we want to rebuild? An Ukraine with Snake Island or without? An Ukraine with Crimea or without? For Romania, the most important thing is to have a Crimea with Ukrainian flag, because that means that economic exclusive zone around Crimea will belong to Ukraine. And Romania, as you mentioned, we have possibility to cooperate with Ukraine in great projects supported by the United States on gas, on wind offshore, and to have this possibility to connect better our countries. The reconstruction of Ukraine means for Romania more bridges, more connectivity. You can create a huge hub in Galați area with Galați Port, Brăila Port, Giurgiulești, Moldovan Port, and Ismail and Rain. But I don't want to see an American president coming back to Washington or coming to Romania, to Bucharest or to Brussels, and showing us a piece of paper like Prime Minister Chamberlain in September 1938, I have a deal with Mr. Putin, and now I have a peace in Europe. No, because we'll give Putin a huge gift just to have a break, because we feed the beast with our goodwill and money after the annexation of Crimea, hoping that we avoid a new war. And now we had a full invasion of Ukraine. It's necessary to understand, not in Warsaw, not in Romania, not in Tallinn, and not in Kiev, but in other capitals, and first of all, in Washington, what means Russia. And to have a deal with Russia is very dangerous. And Ukrainian knows very well the effect and consequences of Budapest Memorandum, when a guarantor became an invader. And I hope, dear American friends, that, of course, in the democratic states, each 4 years you have elections. In Romania we'll have elections, all elections next year. But by far the elections in the United States are more important, not only for Ukraine, but for entire eastern flank. And I hope that the new president of the United States will be committed to engage the United States in NATO affairs like previous presidents, and that for the new president of the United States, the Article 5 will have the same importance for the United States like for President Reagan or other presidents of the United States. Thank you very much for all of you, and I hope, and I invite, because I invite the next year to Bucharest when we'll have our flagship event, BOYSE and Balkan Security Forum, and to discuss about how we can better support Ukraine, how we can contribute to the rebuilding process of Ukraine. And I'm pretty sure, dear friends from the United States, that we can count on your support and on your leadership in this part of the world, very challenging part of the world. Thank you very much to all of you.